A new police chief walks into his precinct undercover, hoping to observe his officers without their masks on. But when a white officer spits in his face, assuming he's just another nobody off the street, the entire department stands on the edge of a moment they'll never forget. It was a thick, humid Wednesday morning in early September, when Marcus Avery, the freshly promoted head of law enforcement, stepped out of a dusty gray sedan into the heart of Brookfield, a quiet southern town nestled between the wooded backroads of Virginia. Clad in a faded flannel shirt, old jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days, he looked nothing like a man who had dedicated 22 years to justice. But that was entirely by design. Marcus wasn't interested in rehearsed greetings or polished speeches. He wanted truth, raw, unfiltered, and unguarded. As a black man assuming authority over a department long rumored to have a culture of bias and abuse, he knew appearances could lie. The truth lived in how people acted when no one important was watching, and to them, today, he was no one. The parking lot buzzed with early morning routines. Patrol cars pulled in and out. Officers shared laughs and swapped stories with coffee in hand. No one batted an eye at Marcus as he strolled toward the precinct, which didn't surprise him. His appointment had barely made the local papers, and the official briefing wasn't scheduled until later that day. With a subtle tilt of his cap and a quiet breath, he walked into the side entrance. The building greeted him with the sharp scent of burnt coffee, a faint trace of sweat, and the chaotic murmur of phones ringing and radios squawking. He moved slowly through the narrow hallway, absorbing the flow of the place, the clicks by the filing cabinets, the sarcastic remarks traded over desks, the way some looked right through him. That was the point. He made it as far as the vending machines near the break room when it happened. "Yo!" The word snapped through the air like a whip. Marcus turned. A tall white officer with a buzz cut and a self-satisfied smirk was approaching fast. His nameplate read, Officer Grady. A few others stood behind him, arms crossed, waiting to be entertained. Grady looked Marcus up and down like he was sizing up trash left on his porch. "You lost, old man? This ain't the bus station." Marcus didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. What was coming next would speak louder than anything he could say. The officer sneered, his voice thick with mockery. "You need to take that trash somewhere else." Marcus stopped cold. The insult hit like a slap, but he stayed still, weighing whether to reveal himself now or let the scene play out. Before he could decide, Grady stepped in closer, raising his voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Didn't you hear me? I said, get lost. We don't need your kind loitering around here." The hallway erupted in laughter. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, his heartbeat thundering beneath his calm exterior. He tried to speak, but Grady leaned in, so close their noses almost touched. Then, without warning, the officer spat directly into Marcus's face. Time froze. The wet impact hit like a second slap. Marcus stood still as the spit slid down his cheek, warm and degrading. The surrounding officers howled. One banged his fist on the edge of a desk, wheezing with laughter, while another shook his head and muttered something about putting outsiders in their place. Marcus could hear the blood rushing in his ears, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, wiping his face with care and restraint. "Is this how you greet everyone who walks through your doors?" he asked evenly. Grady smirked again. "Only the ones who don't belong." More laughter. Marcus didn't respond. He turned and walked down the corridor, his back straight, his silence louder than any outburst could have been. As he disappeared around the corner, the building's intercom crackled. "Attention all personnel. Report to the briefing room immediately." The air shifted. The briefing room buzzed with voices as officers trickled in, some sipping coffee, others chuckling about what they'd just witnessed. Marcus entered through a side door, this time holding a leather folder embossed with the station's official insignia. He stood out of sight for a moment, watching familiar faces settle into chairs, a few still smirking. At the front stood Captain Doyle, a thick-set man with a salt-and-pepper mustache, who raised his hand for quiet. "All right, quiet down. Today's a big day. The department's been under interim command since Chief Lyman's retirement last month. But now we've got our new head, and he's got a hell of a resume." Officer Grady leaned lazily against the back wall, arms crossed, clearly still proud of himself. Captain Doyle glanced toward the side door. "Let me introduce you to our new Chief of Police, Mr. Marcus Avery." Marcus stepped into view, his stride slow and steady. The entire room froze as Marcus approached the front, each step echoing like a warning. He set the folder on the podium and took a moment to scan the faces staring back at him. His calm, composed presence only deepened the tension in the air. Grady's smirk faded. His posture stiffened, and the blood drained from his face as realization sank in. Around the room, murmurs flickered to life, side glances, hushed whispers, and widened eyes that said everything without a word. "Good morning," Marcus began, his tone steady and firm. "My name is Marcus Avery. As of this morning, I am your new Chief of Police." The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Grady's face flushed crimson, his arrogance melting into unease. Marcus let his eyes rest on him for just a second longer than necessary before turning his attention to the rest of the room. "I arrived today dressed like any other man," he said, voice even but cutting, "because I wanted to see this department for what it really is, not through press releases or scheduled tours. What I witnessed was disturbing." A ripple of tension moved through the room, but Marcus raised a hand, and the noise died instantly. "In the short time I've been here, I've already seen conduct that isn't just unprofessional, it's disgraceful. And let me be absolutely clear. Whatever culture has been allowed to thrive here, that ends now." No one spoke. No one shifted. The words landed like hammer blows. Grady looked down at the floor, swallowing hard. Marcus stepped slightly forward, the tone in his voice now razor sharp. "Respect is not optional. It's the baseline. Without it, we're not protectors. We're a threat. And if we fail at respect, we fail everything this badge stands for." The room held its breath. Officers sat rigid, absorbing the weight of each word. "Earlier today some of you laughed, thinking you were watching another powerless man being put in his place," he said, his voice unwavering. "Let me make something very clear to all of you. Every single person who walks through these doors, uniform or not, deserves respect. Every one of them." His voice sliced through the stillness, exposing every crack in the room's confidence. Grady shifted again, the sweat now visible along his temple, but Marcus didn't pause. "I know change makes people uncomfortable," he continued, his tone low but resolute. "But moving forward, there will be zero tolerance for any action that degrades or humiliates another human being, whether they wear this badge or they never have." He stepped down from the podium and began walking slowly toward the rows of stunned officers. His presence was commanding, but every word carried a calm intensity that gripped the room. "Officer Grady," Marcus said, stopping just a few feet from the man. Grady visibly tensed, the cocky bravado he flaunted earlier now completely gone. "You," Marcus continued, locking eyes with him, "represent everything that has corroded this department from the inside out. When you spit in my face, it wasn't just me you disrespected. It was the badge, the oath, and the community we swore to protect." Grady stammered. "Chief, I didn't realize—" "That's exactly the problem," Marcus cut in, his tone sharp and unwavering. "You didn't care to realize. You didn't stop to ask, to consider, because you assumed the man standing in front of you didn't matter. That assumption? It's why this department has lost the faith of the people it claims to serve." Not a single voice responded. The silence was total. Every officer stood rooted in place. Marcus turned his gaze to the entire room. "What I witnessed today wasn't just one man's lapse in judgment. It was a symptom of a culture that rewards arrogance, tolerates disrespect, and turns a blind eye to prejudice. That ends now." He stepped back toward the lectern, his voice rising just enough to leave no doubt. "I've dedicated my life to justice, not just on the streets, but in rooms like this, behind walls where silence lets rot grow. Change is never comfortable, but I'll say this clearly. As long as I am chief, this station will be built on integrity, respect, and accountability." He paused, his gaze steady as his words settled over the room like a verdict. Then, with a nod to Captain Doyle, he continued, Effective immediately. Officer Grady is suspended, pending a full internal investigation. And if any of you think this is symbolic or temporary, think again. This is the beginning. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the room. Grady's face flushed deep red, his jaw clenched as he looked anywhere but at his fellow officers. Marcus didn't flinch. "This isn't about revenge," he said with firm conviction. "It's about restoring a standard that should have never been compromised. If you can't rise to it, then this place isn't for you." He swept his eyes across the room, locking eyes with officers one by one. "If you're ready to do better, to be better, then I'll lead you forward. But understand this. I will hold every one of you accountable from this moment on." The meeting ended in weighted silence. Officers shuffled out, their usual chatter replaced with heavy footsteps and introspective stares. Marcus remained behind, standing at the podium, watching as Grady stormed out, his face a tangled storm of shame and bitterness. The others avoided his eyes, their expressions caught somewhere between discomfort, guilt, and quiet resolve. Back in his office, Marcus sank into the chair behind his desk and let out a long breath. He understood this was only the beginning. Years of ingrained behavior wouldn't shift overnight, and for some officers, it might never shift at all. But Marcus hadn't come to Brookfield to win popularity contests. He came to create change. The phone rang. It was Captain Doyle. "Chief, I just wanted to say, you handled that better than most would have," Doyle said, his tone cautious but sincere. "Appreciate that, Captain," Marcus replied. "But the real work starts now. I want a full report on Officer Grady's file, complaints, disciplinary notes, everything. On my desk by morning." "Understood," Doyle said. Then after a pause he added, "And Chief, I think you shook a few of them today. In a good way." Marcus ended the call and allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, before focusing on the growing stack of files waiting for his attention. In the weeks that followed, the precinct felt noticeably different. Officers who once laughed along with Grady now kept their distance, their hushed conversations a mix of speculation and discomfort. Marcus made it a habit to walk the halls each day, nodding to every officer he passed. His presence was quiet, but constant, a reminder that leadership was no longer absent. Some embraced the shift. Officer Ramirez, a young patrolwoman still early in her career, approached Marcus one afternoon. She admitted that she had stayed silent in the past, not out of agreement, but out of fear. "I want to be better, Chief," she said quietly. Marcus looked her in the eye, his tone steady. "That's all I ask. It starts with you." But not everyone welcomed the new standard. Grady filed an appeal, alleging unfair treatment and claiming his suspension was politically motivated. Marcus didn't flinch. Accountability wasn't a negotiation. The internal review uncovered a troubling pattern in Grady's record: repeated complaints of excessive force, documented verbal misconduct, and warning signs that had been ignored for too long. His appeal was denied, and Marcus made it known across the department. The era of turning a blind eye was over. Still, progress came in steps. Discussions around bias, de-escalation, and rebuilding public trust stirred mixed reactions among the force. Some nodded along, others resisted, arms crossed, minds closed. But Marcus remained steady. The road ahead was long and full of resistance, but he hadn't come to tread water. He came to turn the tide. Every small win, a rookie finding the courage to speak up, a seasoned officer rethinking old habits, was a step towards something greater. One morning, Marcus attended a local community gathering, the kind meant to ease tensions and open conversations. While chatting with a few residents, a young boy hesitantly walked up to him, clutching a worn backpack and looking uncertain. "Are you really the chief?" the boy asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "I am," Marcus replied, offering a warm smile. "My dad says the cops don't care about people like us," the boy said quietly, almost as if he wasn't sure he should be saying it. Marcus lowered himself to the boy's level, meeting his gaze. "I can't fix everything that's happened before," he said gently, "but I can promise you, We're trying to be better every day. And if you ever need anything, you come find me, all right?" The boy gave a small nod, his serious expression softening into a smile. Moments like that reminded Marcus exactly why he had taken this job in the first place. By the time his first year came to a close, the precinct still had its flaws, but it was undeniably evolving. Officers who resisted change were no longer part of the force, replaced by recruits who believed in the same values Marcus stood for: integrity, equity, and respect. The community, once wary and distant, began to notice. People who had long kept their distance were now cautiously engaging, acknowledging the department's effort to repair what had been broken for too long. One evening, Marcus stood quietly in the main hallway of the station, watching as officers wrapped up their shifts and headed out. The sounds of laughter and conversation filled the space, not fueled by mockery or exclusion, but by a real sense of connection. For the first time in a long time, he felt something deeper than resolve. He felt hope. The road ahead would still be steep, and the battles wouldn't disappear overnight. But real change was never meant to be easy. It was meant to be earned, and it was worth every fight.